I've never seen Dr. No. Well, we changed that. Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Connors, and with us is Andre. How you doing?
Greetings, everyone. I'm good, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing the best I can. We also have Rob, the voice of Midnight's Edge, with us,
Hello, everybody.
and a very special guest with us on this journey, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. How you doing?
It's very good to be here with you, gentlemen.
Well, of course, if you're not aware of what's going on, did you want to intro this, Andre, or should I?
Yeah, well, since you are the one that hasn't seen James Bond before, well, that's kind of like what we're doing since I started already. Because the background is that Tom hasn't seen a single James Bond movie prior to this. Something we discovered when we made him edit all of the James Bond videos that we have done, and we got like these really basic questions back from him, like who's this guy, who's that guy, and it was like funny. You sent me like a picture. Is this M? And I was like, no, that's Q. So,
Like, is there one for every one of the alphabet here, or what? No.
I like seeing the palpable confusion because like when you got like the audio from Rob detailing the story of the video, then it probably sounded like the adults in Charlie Brown to you, I would imagine. So
A little bit, yes. That's why I needed
yeah.
everybody's help on that
Wonk,
one.
wonk, 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 wonk. Yeah.
So we decided that this was an omission that had to be corrected.
Yes.
And we're going to do it like on Thursdays going forward, because that is the day when we have the help of Robert Meyer Burnett, who is a huge James Bond aficionado, just as our own Rob. So that's funny. We have two Robs on the panel, and they're both huge Bond aficionados. So Burnett, why don't you begin with just saying what does James Bond mean to you?
Well, I started watching James Bond movies on American television when I was a kid, and it's kind of hard to explain to people now because I'm freaking old, but there were only three networks, and ABC, NBC, and CBS, and James Bond movies would play usually on Sunday nights on ABC, and they would advertise them all week long. And when you're a kid, especially growing up in the 70s, as I did, when you're a kid seeing something like this, I mean, I loved science fiction, fantasy, horror. I would watch anything: Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Star Trek, the Irwin Allen shows like Time Tunnel or Land of the Giants, or any of those things. And when they would show James Bond commercials, they would always emphasize the girls, the gadgets, the explosions, the exotic locales. So to my mind, it fit in that kind of wheelhouse. And then as a kid, when I started watching these films, how could you not want to be the same way I wanted to be James T. Kirk? I wanted to be James Bond. And it was the kind of thing where James Bond was always impeccably dressed. He always knew what to say in any situation. He knew the temperature to drink champagne at, the proper temperature. He knew everything about every gun that was ever manufactured. And it was the kind of thing where it was the ultimate wish fulfillment. And then also another thing, a la Star Trek, James Bond was always going to places on the planet Earth that I'd never been. And he was always traveling to these exotic locales. And let's face it, half the villains he met were borderline fantasy characters anyway, especially in this first film, Dr. No. Dr. No is a science fiction villain with a science fiction lair, even though it's the early 60s. The film came out in 62. And Dr. No is not the first James Bond movie I saw. I want to say that I saw Diamonds Are Forever first on TV because that's how I remember it. But it was either Diamonds Are Forever or Thunderball were the first two Bond films that I really remember seeing. And Spy Who Loved Me was the first Bond film I ever saw in the theater, which blew my mind because it came out a few months after Star Wars. So I'd seen Star Wars and I had seen Spy Who Loved Me right after I turned 10 years old. And that was hugely... I mean, I'd seen James Bond movies on NTSC television, so the broadcast standard was low. And to go into a giant theater and see The Spy Who Loved Me, which was Bond's return to widescreen glory after Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun, to see that, it blew my mind. The 1-2 punch of Star Wars and Spy Who Loved Me in the movie theater when I was 10 literally changed my life. And I the Bond franchise has always been with me, and I'm the first person to admit there's probably less great Bond movies than there are mediocre Bond movies, but I just love the entire franchise.
Let's hear from our other Rob, who is also like a huge Bond aficionado.
Yeah.
What does Bond mean to you?
It means style. It means flair. It just means cool. It everything about it was just, when I was a kid, was just, that was the pinnacle of cool. And I remember, I distinctly, I could still see it in my mind's eye, you know, the ABC Thursday night movie. You know, Sean Connery is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007, and then he turns with the flare gun and fires it at the gasoline in the water, from Russia with love. You know, I distinctly remember that image.
Yep.
And that's stayed with me. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, it's just been that aspirational image, that ideal, and that unobtainable thing to strive for. You were never going to reach it, but you always wanted to try. It's so much so that I started going to Europe. I started traveling to Europe when I was, I hadn't been to Europe until I was 38, which is kind of criminal, but I was broke for a long time. And finally, a friend of mine said to me, go somewhere you've never been, somewhere that isn't work with your vacation time. And so I went to Stockholm. And I get off the plane, and you can hear the down as you get the bags, and I'm hanging out the van in the old town on my way to the hotel, and and I remember the hotel staff saying to me, "Oh yeah, there he goes again. Yeah, we're keeping an eye on you. Yeah, we're wondering where you're going off to." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, see there, yeah." It's helped shape a lot of how I see the world too.
Yep.
In terms of that, how different places, different cultures, and how women and the attitude you take towards things like drinking and gambling and baccarat. So that's how you play baccarat. A lot of stuff you wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. So,
Andre?
Yeah, as for me, I cannot claim anywhere near the same kind of fandom as the two Robs on the panel. I want to say that I grew up with James Bond, but that would be an exaggeration. James Bond was there in the background. That's more accurate. My first memory of James Bond is actually like when back from 1989, I believe it was, because then I remember that my uncle, who was a carpenter, and he came to help build our family house at the time, and then he took a night off to go to the cinema to see the most recent Bond movie, which was License to Kill, I believe, at the time. And I got like the impression that James Bond was like something dangerous, something like scary and dangerous and cool for the adults. And then it was like this local channel, TV3, which is like a joint channel between Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, that started broadcasting the James Bond movies. And I don't remember right now which is the first I saw. I think that the first one I saw might have been The Living Daylights, which was cool. I like that one. That was one of my favorite Bond movies to date. And after seeing that one was when I saw Dr. No, because then this channel started like broadcasting all of them. So then I saw them in rapid succession, and I liked them fine. They were cool. The ones I especially liked were Diamonds Are Forever, because as a child that was like more fun to me, and The Spy Who Loved Me, because Jaws was cool, and Moonraker again because Jaws was cool, because that space stuff was kind of like lame. And then like the next time when I saw like a Bond movie that like really made an impression, like, whoa, this was awesome. That was the first time I saw a Bond movie in cinema. That would have been GoldenEye. That was the first time I saw a James Bond movie in a movie theater, and it was amazing with him like doing like the bungee jump in the beginning there, and that's the first time in my memory where there actually was like a line around the block to see that movie. I went to see it with my mother actually, so she loved it, I loved it. So that was pretty cool. I had loads of fun with GoldenEye. And then the next one after that, the second Pierce Brosnan movie, the one with Terry Hatcher and like this newspaper thing or something, that I saw in a huge concert arena, actually, the closest equivalent you could get to an IMAX screen. But it was a crap movie. And I really lost interest for the rest of the entire Bond or Brosnan era until we got to Daniel Craig with Casino Royale. Now that movie blew me away. So like that one and The Living Daylights are probably my two favorites of the entire franchise. So like the other movies, yeah, I grew up with them. I liked them fine, but they didn't change my life or anything. So I'm a very casual fan at best.
Well, there you go. And the big elephant in the room is, how could I go 40 years without seeing a Bond movie? Well, just growing up, my dad never was a Bond fan. Neither was my mom or anything like that. It wasn't a film series that was watched often in the house or anything like that. I was raised on things more like Westerns and Rambo and Rocky. The most I've seen of a Bond film was like the opening of a movie. I think we talked about this the other day, and that was the all I've really seen. So yeah, as of this morning, last night, what have you, is the first time I've ever watched a Bond movie. But we want to say thank you to Sister Harold for the generous donation here. We appreciate that. They do keep the lights on here, so we do appreciate that. So yeah, I guess without further ado, Andre, we could probably show my reactions or slight reactions to Dr. No.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I made Tom film his reaction just in case we would get something visceral to see how you would react to it. That I figured that would be a fun experiment.
I'm sure as we get going along, they'll be a bit more exciting. But like this one was just a bit more subdued. So
roll film.
Well, hello. Here we go. I'm gonna watch Dr. No for the first time and react. Here we go. Digging the music already. Saw the camera light. Product placement. That's the same shot twice. Okay. I didn't know that towels had zippers. You got played, lady. A lot of day for night shots in us. Kind of like Die Hard before Die Hard. Well, it was a bit slower than I thought it would be, but it was all right. not 100% sure I know what was going on the whole time. I think I expected a bit more of everything. I get it. This is the first Bond movie, but I'm not sure. Well, let's see what I have to say with the rest of the crew. All right. As you can see, I was not sure what to think. I'm still not 100% sure. It was off to a quick start, and then it got slow, and then it was a very quick ending. And I'm not even 100% sure I know what the bad guy was doing. So, enlighten me, fellas. I'm lost.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I can say is that when I rewatched the movie, I discovered that a movie will always be a classic, but it definitely has an expiry date in terms of like sheer entertainment value.
I was entertained, and that was kind of like some of the scenes where I just threw shots in there of me just watching things. Those were probably some of my more favorite scenes or whatever. Like I really liked the scene in the hotel room. That was like one of my favorite scenes. And when he catches the one guy, the doctor or the scientist, I mean, like that was a pretty good scene. Just once we got to the island, I wasn't 100% sure what the fuck Dr. No was doing. I mean, I get it. There was something to do with nuclear and something to do with
It's all about high-powered lasers, Tom.
I didn't see no lasers.
They were implied.
Yeah.
Off screen.
High-powered nuclear-fueled lasers.
and I don't remember anybody getting slapped. So I don't know if this version that I saw had it cut out.
No, it's not so much that. Like, we'll get back to that later.
But no, I didn't hate the movie.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
We got the super slap super slap. I was about to say. Silver Nova says the first thing Connery does in Goldfinger, he slaps a girl on the backside and says, "Fetch us a drink, will you, love?" The SJWs would have a field day with that one.
And I think that's kind of what Andre was wanting my reactions to, but yeah.
Actually, the first thing that Bond does in Goldfinger in the pre-title sequence is he throws a woman, a belly dancer. He sees the reflection of a guy about to brain him in the back of the head with a club in the reflection as he's kissing a woman, and he throws the belly dancer around to take the blow for him, and she gets knocked out so he can go after the thug. If people would go bananas today that Bond threw a woman in harm's way to save himself.
It'll be funny to see if that scene is still in the 4K version. Or if it has to be,
no, they would never remove that. I just watched it. They would never see. I think the thing about the Bond films is it's hard to go back now and just watch them cold without some kind of context into like where we were at as a culture. Because when the Bond films came out, it's very much the world was very different. We basically had our greatest generation that had won World War II, came back, and in the 50s, especially in America, started the middle class. So most people were not jetting around the country. They were shacking up and having kids and going back to school using the GI Bill. And Ian Fleming was writing these novels based on his wartime experience. And in the 50s, they really captured the imagination of the world, really. And then when Connery was first put on screen, if you remember how he's introduced in this movie, he's playing baccarat at a table in a tuxedo, and he's smoking cigarettes around all these refined people, and he's kind of going head to head with this gorgeous woman, Sylvia Trench, who's clearly enamored of him, and he's beating the pants off her. He's just taking her for a ride, taking all of her money and winning. And the first time you see Bond, he's the epitome of everybody, every male fantasy of virile manhood is shown with Bond's introduction at the beginning of Dr. No, and he immediately in one scene, even the way he's got a cigarette dangling from his lips, he's like Rob was saying, the epitome of style and cool. In one image, he seared into the imaginations of every man on the planet Earth that could go to the movie theater that this guy is the guy that I want to be. And then he goes in and gets debriefed and sent on a mission by M. He goes back to his apartment, and what does he find? Sylvia Trench has figured out how to get into his place. She's playing miniature golf on the floor of his apartment, and he's like, I'm supposed to be at the airport, but I've got time. And he makes love to her. Yeah. I mean, it's you can't sell that short, and what that meant to audiences, especially male audiences in 1962.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say his introduction to me personally in this, I tried to take myself out of knowing the whole Bond tropes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen the scene with the intro before, so that wasn't like anything real new to me. I've seen it in clips before. The part that really stuck out to me as far as the introduction to Bond was, he had this old gun, and they're like, it's a piece of shit. We're going to give you a new gun. And he's like, I don't want a new gun. It's like, so like right there kind of tells me a little bit about the character. He's been at this for a few years. He trusts his equipment that he has now. It wasn't like I was expecting them to give him a bunch of gadgets, like that. I think that maybe, if anything, was like the absence of the expectations of the things going into this that I felt like maybe that's where I was saying, like, at the end of my review, I expect more of, like, because outside of the women factor, I mean, I didn't feel like I was watching a quote unquote Bond movie yet. I guess I didn't feel like all the tropes were there yet. It was just kind of like,
well, no, they were. I mean, they weren't. Yeah. They're all, they're all laid down. What's really interesting is Peter Burton plays Q in this movie, plays, as he's known, Major Boothroyd, and he's the one that brings Bond the Walther PPK that becomes his signature gun. So, as far as Bond lore is concerned, it's an incredibly important moment. Of course, Desmond Llewellyn plays Boothroyd, plays Q after that, but it's a really, it's a pivotal moment in the franchise where Bond is being given, he's got his old Beretta that he's been using, he says, for 10 years. And when he's given the Walther PPK, he's like, I'm bringing you into the 60s. I'm bringing you into the modern age because the CIA, the American CIA, has been using this. It's like this is like throwing a brick through a glass window. And it's got major stopping power. And I think that, you're seeing the dawn of these tropes. Like even the opening title sequence really doesn't have a song. It's got the James Bond, Monty Norman's Bond theme, and then you have the Three Blind Mice song. But then it goes into a cool pre-title sequence where you see these three blind men who turn out to not be blind at all, and they're assassins, and that's their disguise that lets them get into wherever they're going. And they murder Strangeways and the section chief in Jamaica, and the plot is starts rolling. But yeah, I mean, I can understand if we've now had Bond movies for 58 years, or 58 years. So when we're looking at a movie from 58 years ago, so more than half a century ago, and if you think about that, the world is such a different place. Movies are so different.
Right. And I did take a lot of that into consideration, and I was kind of poking fun at the day for night shots and a few things here and there. But technically, overall, I was impressed. I mean, of course, it's just like any other movie from that era as far as the way it was shot and it was, edited and presented. I mean, it had a very quaint feel about it, though, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Right, sure. Compared
to the other, what I'm expecting from the spectacle of Bond. And I get it. Like, I knew, like, going into this one, this was going to probably be the most, lower level of, like, all the action and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't let me down in any way, but I guess I feel like there was just this, I don't know, like, the end wrapped up so quickly and the lull in the middle kind of thing. And I'm not, like, again, I'm still not quite sure what the Dr. No was up to, per se. I mean, I got the whole, like, little story of how Bond is figuring out who Dr. No is and what the island's all about. But, I mean, I guess it just kind of felt like, I almost felt like I was watching an episode of a TV show more than a movie, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, it absolutely does. And I think it comes back, there was a lot of movies at the time, these sort of caper spy thrillers, whether it was Hitchcock's, say, North by Northwest, and this film, this movie was made for $1 million, and it was not made for a lot of money, but it was following along the lines of a lot of the kind of movies that were being made at the time, and the Bond franchise kicked off a whole slew of imitators, like Dean Martin in his Matt Helm movies and the Our Man Flint movies with James Coburn. And I mean, this is the dawn of you're watching the emergence of a genre that became hugely popular during the 60s. And it's a small movie compared to the other Bond films. So you're not wrong.
Yeah. It definitely has like that pot boiler, I guess, sense to it. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but.
And it also, the plot, what Dr. No is trying to do is, and this has happened a lot in Bond movies, he's trying to disrupt our Mercury capsule launches, because going to space was still pretty new, the Mercury 7, and hopefully start a war between the Soviet Union and Russia. And what's really interesting is this movie predates the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we almost did go to war with Russia.
Okay, now that makes I kind of knew it had something to do with missiles and stuff. Yeah, I was trying to figure it all out, but I'm like, wait, does this have to do with the space race? But that's not like for another X amount of years, kind of thing. I'm like trying to figure it all out. And, once we get into the layer, it's like very, it reminds me of Dr. Evil's layer quite a bit, so I got that, aspect of it. And
this was in the middle of the space race. I mean, Sputnik had already.
That's what I was kind of wondering. That's what I was wondering. Okay, because
space race goes back to like 57.
Yeah. Okay, because that's where I was like trying to figure out like when this took place and what was going on here. Is like, is this closer to the moon launch, or is this when they're just first, doing all like that kind of stuff? And I kind of figured that part out. But like again, like I did notice that like, of course. Yeah, most of the bad guys are minorities or whatever, what have you. And it just, that part stuck out like a sore thumb, I suppose, outside the scientist and a few of the girls that were involved, But,
well, what's really amazing is this movie, literally, Dr. No came out days, like within a week of when the Cuban Missile Crisis began for the United States. It opened in the UK, I think October 10th or something of 1962, and then the Cuban Missile Crisis started on October 16th. So the idea of, in terms of being timely, you couldn't have had a more timely movie than this. And we didn't get it in the United States for a while, until 1963, actually. But in terms of these movies, they were incredibly topical at the time. And then the Terrence Young, who directed this movie, he directed Dr. No. He directed From Russia with Love, the next Bond film, which I think is probably the closest to Ian Fleming's Bond books. And then he also directed Thunderball. But imagine at the time, you went and saw this opening weekend in the UK, and you're introduced to Dr. No, and the plot, he really wants to disrupt American space flights to hopefully start a war, to precipitate a war between Russia and the United States. And a week later, they discovered that there's missiles in Cuba in real life that America has to now deal with. And Kennedy calls for a blockade around Cuba, and literally the world comes to the brink of nuclear catastrophe for real, the same week that this movie opened in the UK. Imagine what audiences were thinking. Like, right. Oh my God. That's insane.
It'd be like releasing a pandemic movie right now. Yeah. No, and going back to like, I just noticed a few things like that now would never fly. Like I said, the whole bad guy element, just how some of the women act in the film. And it does go to show you how much things have changed. And I know those were some of the things that Andre wanted me to kind of pay attention to a little bit. But overall, I could see so far, obviously I have nothing to compare it to, but compared to what I know of the whole Bond mythos, this is probably seems like one of the more subdued or tamer of the bunch. I didn't feel like this went completely overboard as far as
the tropes they haven't come into play yet. We're still like 2 more movies before all the tropes come in full force.
Yeah, and while this is a literary adaptation, there was changes made. But it's pretty faithful. But there's a lot of the details are changed. But it's still, it's very much a Cold War spy thriller that comes from definitely a different time.
Right. I mean, I can't help but feel like if this was done now, like the bit that we got throughout the entire movie would be like the first act. Like they would have tightened it up quite a bit. And again, I have nothing, I know how films are made, and especially back then, I have no issues with how movies are, breathe, and they're shot differently and stuff like that. But I noticed that like the plot was very thin. Like there was very little to go on, so there's a lot of just establishing and action and just kind of meandering through the scenes, because like once he figures out what's going on and once they get to the island, it's like, okay, this would normally be like maybe a third or at most halfway through a normal film, like a normal action film. Like we're just getting to the main plot points, and then next thing you know, it's done. I was just like, okay,
Well, and there's a lot of
yeah.
There's a lot of craft going on here. Like, for instance, when Bond goes into his hotel room in Jamaica and how he takes a lock of his hair and sticks it to the drawers in his room. And he does things like when he's about to pour himself the vodka and he thinks twice and he's like, nope, I'll take another bottle that I'm sure of, and pours it. So there's a lot of craft in here that people hadn't seen before. Like when he dusts his attaché case also, there's all of this kind of spy craft that audiences had never seen, and so there's everything that goes on. And also the way Bond, how he meets women, and the fact that he meets Sylvia Trench playing Baccarat, and then that night she's at his apartment and he takes her to bed before he leaves for the airport. There was the overt sexuality in these movies was something that American films just weren't doing. And so it seems quaint to us now, but back in 1962, there was a lot of things that were happening in every scene of this movie. Also, the fact that Bond is up on everything. Like he's so good at his job. He knows when he's being picked up at the airport, for instance, in Jamaica, he's like, I don't think these people are really here to pick me up. I think this is, and he goes and he calls his office and he's like, did you send somebody to pick me up? No. And then Bond gets in the car anyway to see where it goes because he knows whatever's coming his way, he can handle it. There's all these things that that made him the epitome of cool for audiences at the time. And it's hard for us to look back at now because it is quaint.
Yeah. There is actually, you talk about when he checks into the hotel, there's another scene. I watched this with Make It Random last week. You see actually when he checks into the hotel in Jamaica, enjoy your stay, Mr. Bond. Thank you very much. And he goes off and he turns, he goes to his room, and the young lady who is checking him in, she actually eyes him up and down.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is this. And I hate to say this. I liked the film, and I've seen more than enough films from that era before and so on, that I'm not so sure Dr. No holds up. Like, I hate to say that. Like,
no, honestly, I know what you mean.
Well, no,
I'm not sure if
it seems dated. It seems dated now. When you
well, it's not even so much the dated part of it, but like I said, it seems like an elaborate television pilot. Like, I have yet to feel like I'm watching a film, but I get it. It's the beginning. It's the first one. They had no idea if it was going to be anything. I totally understand it was made on an extremely small budget. And even $1 million for back then was nothing to laugh at, but it was still, not a huge budget for the time. And I think it did what it meant to do, but personally now I guess I'd give the best a 6 out of 10 maybe. And I feel bad saying that, but that's
no. I don't think you.
Do it.
I don't think you should feel bad at all because you're responding to. You have never seen a James Bond movie, so like I grew up with them, and you can't expect anybody looking at a movie that was made 58 years ago from the perspective of 2020, when we have the Bourne films and we have the Mission Impossible movies and we even have the Bond movies of today. It's impossible. It's almost like you're going back and watching a movie that's got horse-drawn buggies in it, and there's no shame in that. You're actually, what you're saying is very honest, and it's a reaction. It's really hard. Like Andre, you said something earlier that I think is really important.
Yeah, movies have an expiry date.
They have a shelf life.
Yeah,
and I've always said that my own pet theory is that pop culture has a 20-year life expectancy. And sometimes things endure, like Star Trek and Star Wars and Doctor Who and things like that. But for the most part, you know, you even go back and people have a great affection for the 80s, but it's really hard to even go back 30 years or 40 years and watch movies and not even movies of the 70s, movies that I love. The fashion alone makes it hard to sometimes get past. I mean, I've trained myself to do that, to get past but watching movies now with people that are more than 20 or 30 years old is very challenging because everybody's always commenting on the superficial details of the film. Oh my God, you know, look at those clothes, or oh my God, look at her hair. It drives me bonkers.
See, I can look past those kind of things, but
yeah, but it's tough because, you know, so much of our world, especially now, is made up of what it means to live in our contemporary times.
Well,
and you know, you go back and you watch movies of, say, the 30s. I've been watching a lot of Ealing Studios movies lately, like Kind Hearts and Coronets, where Alec Guinness plays 9 roles, and it's like you're watching something from 1,000 years ago.
And I mean, I look, like, here's the thing. I've watched plenty of films 20, 30, 40, 50 years past when they first come out. And, you know, I always watch them knowing the era they came out, knowing, you know, what was capable at the time. And I never have had a problem, you know, embracing an older film. Like, you know, I didn't see Psycho till way later and certain things like that. And of course, it's one of my favorites and so on. And you know, I guess I just compared to something like that, it just doesn't feel as dated as this did. And I hate being the Debbie Downer on this one. And I do want to watch the next film. Like, after this movie, I'm like, oh, I want to watch the next one now. You know, so don't get me wrong. Like, I did enjoy it and I do want to keep going. But I guess if I have to compare this to a lot of other films at that time that I've seen.
Yeah. You know why I think it's so dated? I think it's so dated because it was so extremely topical at the time when it was made. And everything that is extremely topical will date horrendously. Like, this is something that many movie executives, in my opinion, do wrong. They try to, like, think of, oh, what's popular now? What trend can we chase now? Like, for instance, in the year 2000, you had bullet time everywhere because Matrix had come out. It was a huge hit, so everyone wanted to replicate that. And a few years after that, after, like, Spider-Man was out, then you had, like, all of these early superhero movies like Daredevil and stuff that have, like, all of these stupid sequences that worked in Spider-Man but didn't work anywhere else. And all of, like, these things are, like, very much tropes of the time. And then, of course, you have, like, some story things which are very, very specific. So you have the story plus tropes, which are very time specific, and that serves to make a movie which is great for the time and that still will hold up for those with a special interest in doing so. But anyone exposed to it for the first time will find it dated.
Well,
and there doesn't have to be anything wrong with that. Like, for instance, myself, I love movies from even the 1920s and 30s. I mean, only last year I discovered The Mark of Sorrow from 1920, and it blew me away. It's amazing. But yeah, for most things aren't going to hold up after they have reached the end of their shelf life, as you say here, Robert.
Well, I can give you some examples of films that came out the same year that I've seen later in life. May not be the exact same amount of time in between, but, you know, that I saw, you know, and I knew they were way older films, but it's films from the same year that to me feel like they may even have been filmed later than that year or stand the test of time even more. I mean, you've got things like Kubrick's Lolita, you've got To Kill a Mockingbird, Lawrence Arabia, which I just recently watched, feels like it's a million miles ahead of that. And again, I'm not trying to dump on Dr. No, but it just kind of feels like it's even older than that era in a weird way. Like, if I had to place it, if I didn't know it came out in 62 or 63, like it did in the US, my guess would be it was like a 1950, like an early 1950s film, if that makes sense.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that, but yeah, that's your opinion. So yeah,
No, and
absolutely.
again, I tried to look at it through those eyes that I've seen all those classic films, you know, like in the and it just, to me, it just didn't stand up to things like Lawrence of Arabia, which I just saw recently. And again, that's a personal opinion,
Well,
but
I think I think I know exactly what you're responding to as well, in the sense that, and what Andre said, Lawrence of Arabia in '62 was a period piece, and you know it's a sweeping epic that whereas Doctor No is trying to feel very contemporary in terms of what's happening right now,
Exactly,
and
exactly.
yeah, and there, whereas you know, when you're watching Lawrence of Arabia, it already was a period piece, and it's approached that way. And
Yeah.
if you think, I mean, it's really interesting if you look at other movies. Like, I'm just looking at one of my favorite movies of all time is the original The Manchurian Candidate, and that came
which
out.
I've seen.
That's and that film deals with spycraft and everything, and even though it's black and white, it feels a little bit more contemporary in terms of the way it's directed. And you know, you've got other movies like How the West Was Won, and like you said, To Kill a Mockingbird, and there's a lot of The Longest Day. There's a lot of
How the West Was Won too. Yeah,
there's a lot of it's kind of, I think, in trying to be so contemporary, like Andre was saying, in a way, maybe it became one of the most dated, because even a year or two later, as you watch the Bond films, what's really interesting is when we go through these, there's a new Bond film every year for 62, well, in America, 63, 64, and 65. You know, you had Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball came out in very quick succession, and you can actually see how they change and get more contemporary as you go on. Even From Russia with Love is more contemporary than Dr. No.
Absolutely. I would like to bring in another movie from that era, one of my all-time favorite movies, which is from 1963, the original Pink Panther and its immediate follow-up, A Shot in the Dark from
those
1964.
I enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah, and here's the difference. Here's the difference between them, because with as we said, Dr. No, they're trying to be uber contemporary, like it's now. It's Cold War. It's space race. It's Russia versus America, with England trying to wiggle in something in between with the James Bond, and that's kind of like the thing. It's a now. It's like someone that's right now trying to do like a pandemic movie. That is what James Bond was. Whereas the Pink Panther and A Shot in the Dark, and not talking about the sequels from the 70s, but those two movies, they weren't trying to go for anything contemporary. Instead, what they were going for, they were American movies doing a romanticized version of Europe. And in so doing, they also aren't as dated because they weren't trying to be contemporary. Instead, they tried to like maximize all of basically like all the traveling that you see in James Bond. They were focusing in on that. And in so doing, it became something more classical and more timeless right away, because that's something that you can look back to. Like as a European, then that's you know it's fiction, but at the same time it's like some national romance or Europe romance over it. So it's something else entirely and not compatible. And that's goes back to what I've always said, that the more contemporary you make things, the more you're going to date it. And that's one of my issues with, for instance, The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. That movie is going to date so freaking badly, and give it another 5 years. You're going to find that the Sam Raimi movie holds up better than that one, because that movie was filled to the brim with 2012 markers.
Well, yeah, even Kevin Smith bitched that he was on the phone too much.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was much more timeless. So that's going to hold up. Like that could take place anytime between.
And I totally understand that aspect of movies, and I've taken that in consideration many times over. And again, I don't want anybody feeling like I'm totally dumping on this movie, because Sean Connery was great. There was a lot of great performances. I mean, for the most part, I was able to follow the story. Yeah, it did have some slow bits, but I don't feel like it was a horrible film. It made me feel like I wanted to watch the next one, so I guess it did its job in that respect. I understand who Bond is. I understand kind of the world they set up a little bit, and I do want to explore it some more. So I mean, it did do what it was supposed to do. We did get a couple of super chat donations and stuff like that, Andre. I don't know if you want to catch up on those.
Yeah, sure. We are actually mostly up to date with them as it is, but I'll go through them real quick. From Sister Harrow, we got the super sticker, which we appreciate. Plus a super chat with no message that I can see, but we thank you for your support. We went through the one from Silver Nova. Miranda Sinistra sent us $10. Thank you so much, with no message content that I can see, but we thank you for your support. Mr. Tickle Trunk sent us another cute little doggy with hearts and jumping and everything, so that's nice. And Darth Plato also sent us a super chat for $1, again with no message content. If that's intentional, awesome. But there's so many of now without. Yeah. But yeah, well,
let us know if you guys are like doing that on purpose. If not, like, yeah, if somebody's writing something and it's not coming through, let us know, because I know, Google and YouTube have been goofy lately.
Yeah, they've been. And we just got $20 Mexican from Bogue saying live action Cowboy Bebop cast this out. It's mega woke.
Lovely.
I wouldn't even know, but
and I got some people who are upset because I'm comparing it to masterpieces. Well, to me, most people talk about Bond like it's a masterpiece. So again, I understand I probably went in with a bit of a too high of an expectation, perhaps.
Well, Tom, Kitty Bear NPC just threw you a rope.
Yeah, that I can admit for sure. Because I think I gave roughly the same score to TLJ at the time it came out, but it's subsequently definitely gone down in my score list for sure. So yeah, no, I didn't hate the film. I liked it a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing more. I'm not sure what reaction you guys were expecting out of me. Yeah, I did get that pulp feel to it, JC. Like, it does have a very, I get that. It's got a very 60s pulp feel to it. And I liked it. I liked that aspect of it. I liked the music. I enjoyed it for the most part. Yeah. And then Mills says here, Dr. No is the weakest of the Connery films. And I can see that. I mean, I'm sure he's still getting the character, and this is the first time we're ever seeing Bond.
Yeah, well, he's awesome. Like Bond, Connery is always awesome as Bond, but the movie that he's in, that's like the thing that's going to vary a little bit. But here's like the thing that it's on the strength of Sean Connery that the franchise was built. But Fractal Jack, he has a question for you, as you see on screen.
My favorite bits. I mean, the intro was good. I liked the scene in the hotel, like I said before, where he's setting up the little traps to see if somebody's gotten in his hotel or not. I liked the bit where he was, after he sent the one lady away at her house, and he was waiting for the scientist to come in, and he got him. And I thought there were some pretty inventive parts, like with the cyanide cigarette. That was where I chuckled in that one bit in the preview deal. Like, pretty much anytime I chuckle like that is like I'm kind of impressed by something, or I thought it was kind of neat or clever. I mean, there was a couple bits that actually just made me chuckle because they're pretty funny lines. So, I mean, some of the jokes still hold up. The one-liners still hold up. I mean, again, I got some of that whole, like, if I was watching this as somebody from the night, I tried to watch it in both ways, and I noticed, how the characters were presented and that period, and how they wouldn't stand up today to the SJW standards. But at the same time, again, I reiterate, this is probably the weakest of any of the ones that I've seen any problematic issues with the film itself. Yeah, he's a bit of a ladies' man, and he sleeps with like 4 women in the movie. But I mean, that's kind of the character. I mean, and a lot of that stuff I thought was kind of funny. Or not so much funny, but I just thought it kind of came with the territory. And 9 times out of 10, it seemed like these women were throwing themselves at him. So, like, that's the other thing. Like, not most of the time they're the ones that are being the aggressors. So,
that's the problematic thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sylvia Trench being the first of them, and that's established. And I in a way, it's kind of refreshing to see that these films, as much as you talk about Bond as Bond is called in GoldenEye, sexist, misogynist dinosaur, it's nice to see women in these films take the initiative. They like see a hunk of burning love, like Sean Connery as Bond. He cuts a fine silhouette in that tuxedo, and they know his virility, and they go for it. The women go for it. I mean, it's so strange. We live in I never thought I would live in a time where I felt the world had been desexualized, but I definitely feel it has been, and it's really odd.
And it's only getting worse.
It's almost Victorian in a sense,
I mean,
well, even in the Victorian era, people couldn't wait to tear their clothes off one another, and now it's like any form of sexuality.
Well, yeah, a big part of the whole Victorian era was subduing your sexual urges.
I mean, it's such a weird. It's the way the world has changed in the last 10 years is very strange to me. I mean, I would love to write a book about what it was like to live in Los Angeles in the late 80s and 90s. Nobody would believe it anymore.
God,
Certainly fun, though.
I would have freaking loved to be in LA.
Like I say, all Hollywood needs is a big injection of cocaine again.
It's the same thing. Like living on the East Coast is the same way. You probably know that, Robert. You ever hear of a movie called Mondo, New York?
Vaguely, but I have not seen it.
Well, it's all about the New York underground, like all the the freaky kind of people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, that's the New York I always, living on the East Coast, that was the New York I always envisioned,
Yeah.
And right now I'm the scariest thing in New York. it's bizarre. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is when you walk down the street, someone's going to throw a gluten-free cupcake at you. It's this weird sanitization of society we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years.
You know what? I object to the term. There's absolutely no sanitization. It's rather sterilization or censorship, or call it what you want. But it's absolutely nothing positive that I would attribute to it, and it's all going the wrong way fast.
Oh, I mean, I could tell you stories even through the mid 2000s in LA.
Yeah,
there was some crazy. Now, I'm sure crazy stuff goes on. I'm just old, so I don't partake of that anymore. Like I'm not, but I think, what's really changed is, kids today are all growing up with prescription medication. Yeah. Everybody's on. So in terms of like having some crazy drug fueled night where you'd wind up at a party in Malibu and take some girl home and you'd wake up with her and you'd be like, where am I? And those were great nights. And nowadays stuff like that, people are all, like when I was growing up, none of my friends took prescription drugs. Nobody was on Percocet or Zoloft or whatever their, Adderall, little crush up the Addy to get through the day. I mean, nobody did anything like that. And it was nowadays it's so strange when everybody has grown up in sort of like a stupor, and between the drug of social media, that narcotic, and then all the prescription narcotics people are on. Everybody's sitting around talking about their feelings. I'm like, whatever happened to people going out wanting to go get fucked? Not on Tinder, but like have a good night where you didn't know what was going to happen. You weren't looking at your phone all the time. You'd have to walk into a room and figure out a way. You'd have to come up with some witty repartee to get somebody you didn't know to talk to you. I mean, there was a whole thing. You had to have skills to go out into the world and make something of it in terms of having fun. And nowadays it's all like swipe right, swipe left. Everything is done online. Does anybody walk into a room anymore without their cell phone, and just rely on their wits? I mean, one of the things Rob was talking about earlier is that growing up as a kid wanting to be Bond, you had to have a wide base of knowledge that stuff you knew. You didn't even know when you needed to know it. You had to. When I was growing up as a kid, I'm like, my parents. There was one time, my mom. It was in the second grade. My mom tells the story all the time, and I used to come home from school and over dinner, tell the dinner table everything I'd learned that day in school. It didn't matter what it was. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, did you know that in 1928 this happened? Like, and finally it got to a point where my mom finally just said told me literally to shut up. That she's like, don't, at the dinner table, can you just please be quiet? And I honestly, I thought it came out of that idea of, my God, every shred of knowledge that you could gain about any subject could be valuable, because you never know, like James Bond, when you're in a situation where you might have to know these things. And I think that was sort of ingrained in me, and that's why I'm interested. Like, if I met somebody that was into something like horticulture or basket weaving, and they wanted to go to a basket weaving convention, I'd be like, I'll go. Just because what's that all about? I felt that way my whole life. And I think it absolutely came from James Bond, because Bond knew stuff about everything.
Exactly.
And to me, that means everything is worth learning. So, when you walked in to chat up a lady, you'd have to know. You'd have to have it was that knowledge where you could come up with this witty repartee. That was important to learn. Like Rob said, you had to have style, you had to have panache, you had to have wit about you, and humor and insight. And I feel like we've lost that in our culture today. I mean, you meet people and so many people, like even I'll lecture at a college or something, or a high school, about film or whatever. And at the end, I always ask, hey, so does anybody have any questions? And nobody ever raises their hands anymore. I mean, even when I was in school 30 years ago in college, if we had a guest at film school, we wouldn't let them leave. The whole class would be peppering these people with questions all the way out into the parking lot until we had them surrounded at their car for 25 minutes before we'd let them go. And nowadays, if you get one question from students in a classroom, you're doing good. And it's such a weird world that we live in now. It's so strange.
Yeah, and it's not altogether good. That's another thing that I also think that Bond gives really needs credit for. Rob, as you mentioned before, this is a big deal of what made you travel to Sweden and probably to Norway too, like getting that James Bond feel.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, I remember getting off the plane, getting my bags. Actually, when I landed in Norway, KLM, they left my bag back at Schiphol, but they did deliver it to my hotel. So I always say KLM is my favorite airline.
Yeah, I will say that Schiphol is a shithole airport, but
but Schiphol, I did like Schiphol because as I was walking through the airport,
I like Amsterdam. I don't like Schiphol, but Amsterdam is awesome.
Well, anyway, I was walking through the airport and I looked over and I said, "Wait a minute, apart from, I don't know, has any Robert, have you been to Amsterdam?
Yes.
Okay, so you know the people carriers. Mind your step.
Yeah.
And I'm riding the people carrier, and I look over. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. There's a casino in the airport, and there's a bar, and the bar is in the casino. Oh man, I may just stay here for a week. Like these people know.
When I like you, the amazing thing about going to Europe is every single thing is different. Nothing is the same as it is in the United States. And even you have these ultra modern things that are butted up against buildings that are 1,000 years old. And when, I mean, I can't tell you, I love going to Europe. I love it, love it, love it. I mean, and because Europeans have been human beings a lot longer than Americans have, they've got thousands of years of history behind them. So everybody's more refined, even if they're not. They are, in my mind, they are. So everywhere you go in Europe, every single thing is different than the United States. Whether you're constantly looking around at all of the details, and like you said, there's a casino in the airport, and then when you go there, you feel like you're in this. You feel like you're in a Bond movie, even though everybody around you is like, "What?" But they don't know that in your mind you're like, "I'm in a Bond film," and that's what you're thinking, and it never ends. That feeling never ends. Whether I'm sitting in an outdoor cafe having a glass of wine, hearing foreign languages spoken, I'm like in a movie. You can't ever downplay that, and it doesn't matter where you are in Europe, it's the same. If you're an American that you grew up in the James Bond fan, I guess now you'd feel like you're in a Bourne movie or a Mission Impossible movie. But that's one of the great joys of going to Europe is that you walk out of the door of your hotel and the entire universe it's like being in a movie. And that never goes away for me.
One thing I always say that no matter how many times I go there, Europe has a distinctive smell over America. I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't know if it's because there's cafes and coffee shops or the diesel fuel that every vehicle runs on. I can't quite place it, but as every once in a while I'll catch a sniff of it here. I'm like, wait a minute. You'll stop. I'm like there's that smell. I know that smell.
Diesel.
And no, Mills, I have not read the books, obviously, or I'd be a little bit more up on things, probably. And yeah, that's what I said too. Thundercats Ho, Dr. No felt like kind of like a pilot episode or a backdoor pilot to a show. And I got to imagine maybe like if the movie wasn't as successful, that's possibly what it would have led to instead of a film series. But, you know, I can kind of see that happening if that was the case. HG Latin Boy sends in $5. How do you guys feel about Disney's Godmother trailer dropping and featuring a cast of 99% white people? I've not seen the trailer, so I can't comment. Anybody else? No?
But what the hell is a godmother?
I'm assuming it's probably some other take on Cinderella again. I don't know how many different ones we can have, but just going by the name itself, I'm assuming.
Okay, yeah, well, cool. And it has 99% white people, and this is presumably bad. Like, it's surprising if a Disney movie has, like, that's not going to get considered for Oscars, let's say.
Yeah, I'd have to check out the trailer. We'll check that out. Maybe we'll talk about that on Mead. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in a Canadian $5. Hey, thank you so much. Don't forget to hit the like button. Well, you didn't have to spend $5 to say that, but we appreciate it, Mr. Tickle Trunk. That helps us quite a bit here at the channel. Boag sends in a Mexican $20. 80s Republican California was paradise. Going back to what Robert was talking about before when you were living it up in the late 80s and 90s in LA, it sounds like.
It was. I mean,
I have to say, I would have loved to have been both in California and especially in Miami in the 80s, because I grew up with Miami Vice. So like where you grew up romanticizing Europe, I had Europe at my fingertips. I grew up romanticizing America.
Oh, hey, Miami was a shithole until Miami Vice started to air on TV, and they actually, that started the big renaissance of like Miami Beach and all those hotels. And remember, even Bond in Goldfinger, it opens at the Fontainebleau. It opens at a huge Miami Beach hotel. The movie kicks off when Bond first meets Goldfinger in that film. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's funny how we romanticize these. The funny thing about watching Bond movies is I always hated when James Bond came to America. I'm like, I don't want to see Vegas. Like in Diamonds Are Forever, and Miami Beach was okay because it was still exotic, but like in View to a Kill, he goes to San Francisco and there's a truck chase with a fire truck. I'm like, I hate this. Why am I watching this?
You want to see something different, yeah.
I'm like, Bond needs to be in Europe. Everything in Europe is cooler than the United States, except New York City.
There's one thing that was really cool though. Sheriff Buford T. Pepper, or whatever his name.
JW Pepper.
Oh man,
what are you, boys?
Buford T. Justice? What?
Oh my God.
I don't recall his exact name, but I thought he was funny when I was a kid.
I think you're mixing up a couple characters there.
No, it's J.W. Pepper.
Okay,
yeah, that's the actor.
I was say Buford T. Justice is in
Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah,
he is it.
It kind of reminds me a little bit like that, a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Captain Robert April says we still live in a world where almost every man on the planet who puts on a tuxedo, gay or straight, even if only to themselves, goes Bond, James Bond. Yeah, that's true.
I
mean, yeah. And today is National Men's Day, so there you go. I think it was a perfect day to start this show.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you though, Robert, the one thing last year when we went to Star Trek Las Vegas and we went and I got off the plane and went through the terminal at McCarran, I did stop and say, wait a minute, Diamonds Are Forever. This is it right here. This terminal has not changed. So I did have one. I did have one of those moments. So
Yeah, no, that's true. That's I mean, Diamonds Forever. It does make good use of Las Vegas. I mean, Jimmy Dean and Bambi and Thumper and all that. But it's just, to me, I Europe to me is or anywhere, anywhere when Bond would go to would go to Asia too. I would love that as well. I mean, I've wanted to go to Japan my whole life, and I don't know why I've never been there. I've been to South Korea, but I haven't been to Japan. And I think the reason I can't go to Japan is unless I have $20,000 to spend on die-cast Gundam robots, I don't want to go to Japan because I'll just be depressed. But I'd still love to see the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Tinkletrunk, yet again, thank you so much, says Google killed and social media killed catching up with friends. I agree with R&B. Knowledge is power, and spice you need they can get.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. People don't have to really know anything anymore, because you can use your phone and Google whatever you need to find out. But that's not really knowing anything. When Bond knows, like there's where is it when he eats caviar in one of the movies, and he knows where they came from. He knows, like, it's from the Caspian Sea or something.
it's
Well, not only that, just a lot of the stuff that he has to deal with. He ain't got time to look at his phone on Google.
Well, but I mean, back in the day, they didn't have that. So
well, that's what I'm saying. Even still, like, even if he did, like, he wouldn't have the time to react that way. You like, how do I do this? Oh, like,
also, I will say that, like, having all that information at your fingertips makes you more dumb.
Trust me, I know, because I've got a kid and I say the same damn thing every time. It's like, how can this generation be so fucking stupid when you have the world in your hands? You literally have every answer in the world right in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, exactly, and you don't have to think to get it. It's like tell someone that's grown up with a mobile. Yeah, like how much is like 7 times 8? I don't know. Let me look.
Why do you think 2 + 2 = 5 now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah. Common Core math. I'm like, where did this come from?
Was it? It was View to a Kill. Actually, he was floating away in the little iceberg. Remember? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
That was it. He goes Beluga, Caspian.
Yeah. I mean, just knowing that kind of thing, and everything that Bond knows is born out of experience. You know that he learned all of what he knows in the field. And I think that was something else that was important. And also later in the series, like in Goldfinger, like in the famous scene where Goldfinger has him on the table and the laser is out there about to cut him in half, you see that Bond is panicking. Like, he's thinking, I might not make it out of this. And he has a Hail Mary tactic that he uses. Operation Grand Slam, for instance. And Goldfinger stops and is like, that's just something you overheard. And Bond's like, yeah, but can you take that chance? And if Goldfinger said, nah, fuck it, die. And but Goldfinger does. Goldfinger listens to Bond. Like, Bond's also a psychologist, a psychiatrist. He knows how to get under people's skin, and he has so many different skill sets. And I think that's what makes him an appealing character as well.
One of the things in Goldfinger, he doesn't act Bond when he's sitting down with a mint julep with or Goldfinger. He doesn't actually know all the details of the plan, but as you said, he does get him to reveal it.
Yeah,
it's inspired Goldfinger, and he was, but the Americans would certainly, and it's like, and like then. I'm like, and you watch it, I'm like, that's actually really clever.
Yep. Bond is clever. I mean, even when he's talking to in Dr. No, when he goes to see the doctor, the geologist that he's working with, Professor R.J. Dent, and the guy who's actually in cahoots with Dr. No, and when Bond knows he's lying about Strangeways coming to him to get these samples, he's able to turn. Oh, he goes, one minute. He turns back and goes back and asks him a question and puts him on notice. Like, I'm on to you, buddy. And it's a great moment where he's using his wits to sort of kneecap somebody who's lying, and Bond knows he's lying, and it's great. I love it.
Absolutely.
Right. Darth Plato sent in $5, says this only shows how far radical feminism has intruded the culture. By and large, There is a tie with feminism and nihilism, and God is dead.
There are many things that are combining in the worst possible ways there. But yeah.
Well, what's really interesting, I think, and it's reflected in I think the Bond franchise, is that I don't have a problem with women wanting any kind of equality. I think absolutely that should happen, and we see in the Bond franchise, beginning with Spy Who Loved Me, like Agent Amasova, Triple X, Bond's Russian counterpart, who is, for all intents and purposes, is equal. And then, of course, Wai Lin, we meet Michelle Yeoh in Tomorrow Never Dies, a Chinese agent that is also as capable as Bond. So we see that women can team up with Bond, but there isn't this denial. Like what I find so interesting is that there is in I've always said you can't trade one oppression for another. And embracing feminism, I don't think is problematic until you start denying your own biology and suddenly portraying like for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, humans evolved because we were fighting off predators. And the reason that we had defined roles in life, the way that the men were the hunter-gatherers that would go out and get the food, and the women would stay at home and watch the children, is because if that didn't happen, we would die. Predators would come and kill us. We needed food. And if you didn't have men protecting the women, the children, the offspring would die, and humanity would not have flourished. And that was true for tens of thousands of years, before we became agrarian, before we planted crops. And so our defined sexual roles, gender roles, were for the survival of the species. We didn't have the luxury. We didn't have culture yet. We were still trying to survive for most of human existence on the planet. And, in the last couple hundred years, that has changed because we're no longer as worried about existing. And now we live in the modern age, and women should be equal to men. But right. we're denying what I see with a lot of feminist thought and a lot of critical race theory and whatever you want to call it. What they want to do is punish especially men for the gender roles that we had for tens of thousands of years,
right?
Which is how we evolved as a species, and everybody wants these changes now to happen immediately, and it's such a strange thing. So we've kind of gone from having these very defined roles, and the Bond franchise is dealing with that. That's why when you go back and you watch a TV show like Mad Men, this is the way society was. And whether that was good or bad or not, I mean, it's really not for me to say. It was just different. Right. It was just different. And our human civilization is constantly evolving based on where we're at morally and ethically. But now these definitions are coming at the expense of people want to blame previous generations for their victimization, and rather than looking forward and seeing it as a way to move forward and make our civilization better, we're going to move forward, but we're going to punish all of you for what you did for the last 500 years of history.
Right. Or rather, it's not even about that. It's not about it's punishing this generation for perceived slights from previous generations that may or may not be real.
Yeah,
but that's like my issue with terms like feminism, because the language has become weaponized, and feminism today is not the same thing as feminism of a few decades ago that simply wanted equality. There are so many today that do not want equality. Rather, they want oppression, but they want to turn the tables on what they perceive to be past oppression. And that's really dangerous.
The other part that I find is funny is all these people are trying to drag down what is known as the basic, male role, but yet a specific group has decided to adopt that culture. But that's okay, but men can't be men, but, I'm not going to say what group that is, but you can use your imagination there. JC says, Bond is supposed to be over the top, in my opinion, and the best movies are kind of cheesy. And that's kind of what I think I was expecting. Like this is probably the most straightforward, most believable. I mean, I don't feel like outside of maybe a few moments in the lair, like anything was like something I wouldn't see in the real world. Maybe that's kind of what jumped me to I don't know, that conclusion of like it just didn't feel like a Bond movie. I guess what I was expecting, perhaps.
Well, you'll see, like From Russia with Love has a little bit more pulpy elements to it. I mean, Dr. No's lab and his fire spitting armored the quote unquote dragon, but it starts embracing more of those larger than life tropes in the next film. I mean, you've got a really cool assassin character and things like that. So you'll start to see it develop. But you're right. I mean, this is really a down, as far as Bond goes, it's pretty down to earth.
Yeah, exactly.
And the early Connery Bonds, the first four are they're very much spy thrillers, and the gadgets get a little bit more outlandish, but they're pretty down to earth until you get to You Only Live Twice, when it goes full on epic sci-fi Bond.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess that's maybe more what I was expecting. But again, I'm trying to go into these without any preconceived expectations or notions of what Bond is, and I'm trying to watch it from two different angles. And I think from here going forward, I'm going to watch them twice. Like, because I feel like I don't have enough to. I just watched this. I almost feel like I should have watched it twice before doing this. So, like, I think for the next film, I will do that.
Yeah. Also, from the next film, we'll be getting more into traditional Bond territory as well as into better movies, because this is something that many have said, and it's true. Dr. No is possibly the weakest of all of the Connery Bond movies. So is it a great way to start the series? Maybe not. I think like maybe my introduction was better since I saw The Living Daylights first, which is a great freaking movie and with a great soundtrack.
Because this movie just didn't feel big. It felt more like a TV movie. That's what I kept like kind of feeling like. And again, it didn't help that it was shot in like 1:6:6. Or whatever it is. I think that's what it was. You know, where it's a little bit more square than it is not the widescreen. And
yeah, I mean, and that's true of From Russia with Love and Goldfinger as well. Bond doesn't go widescreen until Thunderball.
And again, that's just an aesthetic thing, and it's just the kind of cameras they use.
Yeah, but that's also like it's something with where it fits in history, because like,
right. I get that, and widescreen was just becoming
TVs.
It was just becoming a thing at this era, and I get that. I totally get that, and that's another reason why I get why it probably feels that way too. But as Dark King says here, Rob, stop using facts when discussing feminism.
Yeah. Facts are problematic, so can't do that.
That's not their truth.
Yeah, and Sander Hammerslag, I like this one. Dr. No, ma'am.
The other one I like is Dr. No Means No. That one's one of Rob's.
I actually borrowed that from the critic, though. So
okay.
Fair, yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, I haven't watched that in so many years. I've got the DVDs, but yeah, I usually tend to watch like 2 episodes of it. Anyway. But no, I'm looking forward to the next film, and I hope everybody's looking forward to me reacting and watching it with Robert and anybody else who might join us. I know there's a few individuals who have specific Bond movies they want to get in on. So yeah, for all those YouTubers that know me and tell me your specific Bond film you want in on. I couldn't remember if anybody said Dr. No. But so that's why we're just with Robert today. But yeah, hopefully this will be a little bit more of an exciting celebration going forward as we travel through the world of Bond and all the other 24 films that are coming out. Of course, we have no idea yet what's going to happen with No Time to Die. That might be out sooner than originally expected because of,
I think that's going to be out before we have reached the end of the 24 movies.
I'm getting that feeling now. So, like, yeah, especially now with this Wonder Woman announcement, that's pretty much going with what our source had told us. So that really does kind of add some credence to that. And I think you have an editorial coming to that effect, don't you, Andre?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. So that's coming before long. Absolutely. So yeah, that's a cool thing. And we also got a super chat from someone that wanted a clarification from me, which of course I'm very, very happy to give. It's Alexander who sends 100 rubles saying, Andre keeps calling it Living Daylights. Is that Live and Let Die one with great Paul McCartney song? No, Living
No.
Daylights is The Living Daylights with even better Aha song.
From 1987.
I don't know if I can agree with the song aspect, but I'll wait till I see the movie to give you that.
Live and Let Die is from 1973.
I was going to say, because Live and Let Die is probably I know most of the songs. Like, I know all the songs. And Live and Let Die is probably my favorite one, but I'm biased because of Paul McCartney.
Awesome.
And Robert, I was watching with Liz of Views, you and Liz of Views, and you were talking about the Living Daylights, and actually I had to correct you just a little bit, and I know it's not really my place. They used the V8 Volante, which is a convertible, but then they had to bring in the Vantage for the cold weather scenes, which is the hardtop.
That's, you know what? You're right. That is correct.
And my second favorite Bond song is probably "View to a Kill." So that helps.
And my all-time favorite Bond song is one that's not even an official Bond song, but rather like a Bond parody song. But I just love it no end. Which of course you have heard as well, Mr. Burnett. So yeah, maybe we should play it.
The garbage one is good too. Yeah,
the Vantage though, the '87 Vantage, still the one of the greatest Bond cars ever.
I think they bring it back in No Time to Die too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
which is amazing.
It is. James May did a feature about the V8 Vantage. He said, the Ferraris, the Germans, the Italians are all very loud. The Aston Martin is the quiet bloke in the corner with the crossword. And then he puts down this crossword, decides he's had enough, and takes them all out for a good hiding. So he says, actually, it is actually the greatest car Aston ever built, and it's fitting that they bring it back for Bond's last hurrah.
Absolutely.
All right. And Dark King 616 sends in another Australian $5. Says, Tom, you just had your cherry popped by James Bond. Welcome to a very, very, very large club. Did you enjoy it as much as everyone else did? I have a feeling I've got, the best is yet to come kind of thing. I'm looking forward to it. Again, the best I can do is give this film a 6 out of 10, but hey, I look at it as, we can only hopefully go up from here, and I know there's going to be some lulls and some bad ones in the way, but I mean, I'm looking forward to this journey. I've been very excited by it, but I think going forward, again, to reiterate, I think I'm going to watch them twice. I'll record my first initial watch, and then I'll probably watch them again just to kind of refamiliar, because I feel like maybe if I watched Dr. No a second time, I'd probably understand the plot of the bad guy a little better, because that was kind of where I was just kind of like scratching my head. I'm just like,
Yeah, because that's like the thing. They're so topical that you have to like do some research on like what's the history of the time, what's the background?
I just wasn't clear on the connection between the new, because they did such a great job explaining everything else up to that point. Maybe I just lost like some interest somewhere like 2/3 of the way. Like all of a sudden, like when I'm trying to figure out what fucking Dr. No's whole plan was, I was lost. I didn't know if he had something buried in the missile, if he was trying to blow up the missile, if he, like I had these questions. I'm like, what is exactly his plan? And then I just knew that Bond stopped him. That's all I know. Like that was kind of where I got. I'm like, okay, like that. I really, like Script Doctor says, nuclear powered radio jamming. Okay. Like that's where I was very lost, and I don't know if maybe it was just I lost focus or something by that point.
That's one thing that's cool though. By this time, they had learned that nuclear power is actually dangerous, and it comes with comes with side effects. Because I don't know if anyone you have seen like the Disney feature, The Atom and I or something, which is like a celebration of nuclear power, which is treated as the coolest thing ever. Because it took some time to fully come to grasp with how dangerous nuclear power actually can be.
Exactly, Thundercats. Bond did something to stop something. Yes.
That's a pretty good summary of it. All right, guys. With that, I would like to thank Robert Meyer Burnett
Yes, thank you so
for
much.
joining us. It's been
Oh,
an
thank
absolute
you.
pleasure to have you here.
It's been great fun. I mean, I've been doing, as Rob said, I've been doing these things. We looked at all the Bonds, one Bond movie from each actor that played Bond on our Whining About Movies show, and we didn't do Dr. No, and we've missed so many because obviously we doing one from each Bond. There's 24 Bond films, official Bond films, soon to be 25. We just haven't seen it, and so we only did 6 of the films. So it's great to go back and revisit them all.
Yeah, so it's brilliant to have you here, and we're really happy to have you shepherd us through these movies with your Bond experience. Of course, we have our own Rob, who's also quite the Bond aficionado, but your passion and your knowledge of the area or of the franchise is still something to behold, and we love doing Bond stuff with you.
You know, it's funny to me. One of the things I always found strange when I was doing the Schmodown, Schmodown is an online, trivia show that is done by Christian Harloff and Mark Ellis. I was part of the inner geekdom level of the Schmodown, and I did not understand why there was no James Bond category, because to me, James Bond films were the cornerstone of growing up being a geek. Like, to me, the things I love was, before Star Wars existed, it was Star Trek, Twilight Zone, Planet of the Apes, and James Bond, and Outer Limits. I mean, those were the big media things that I loved. And the idea that Bond has sort of fallen out of favor from modern geekdom is odd to me. But if you didn't grow up at a time when Bond was on TV and it was a unifying thing, when you go to school on Monday, every kid, every boy and girl watched Bond. We all did, and you talk about that. Well, that really changed because the Bond films became sort of less and less relevant as they went along. And by the time you get to other franchises like Die Hard in '88, and then all the action films of the '90s, and certainly Mission Impossible and Bourne and the Terminator movies, and the big action set pieces were being done better in other franchises. So Bond sort of lost its luster. But I still think that if you're a geek, like if you love the it's crazy to me that people who love the MCU aren't also Bond fans, because Bond was gave us that same kind of action where Bond was trying to save the world, against incredible odds. We never had Thanos, but you had Hugo Drax, who was going to poison the atmosphere from space, or Karl Stromberg with his underwater city, or General Orlov and Octopussy that wanted to start a war. It's just like Bond was the one-man Avengers before the Avengers were a thing. And it's nice to be able to give Bond some love to this, I guess, the new generation, because I was always bummed out that no one grew up with Bond. I mean, and I understand when you grow up, later in life, when you've got things like Jurassic Park or you have The Matrix and those are your touchstones, why would you go back and watch this sort of dusty old franchise that began in 1962?
No, I have no real excuse other than I just didn't make a conscious effort to go and again, it was overwhelming to me. I mean, 20 films or whatever to get through, or over the years it just kept adding and adding. It's like, I'm not that interested. I'm not going to worry about it, kind of thing. I had my Indiana Jones. I had my Rambo. I didn't need,
but
Bond, I guess.
I don't think you need to apologize. I think that speaks to the fact that pop culture is really of its time, and it's kids who are, when you have Rambo and you have Indiana Jones, those were of your time. And so to ask people to go back, I mean, Star Wars, luckily, even though it started in 1977, it's still kind of contemporary because there's always been new Star Wars. Star Trek, luckily, has been contemporary. You keep seeing more of it. And while there's been more of Bond, the Bond franchise, when you go back to Dr. No, it's almost like you're going back to a different century. Well, now it is. You are going back to the 20th century, but even the space between where Bond is and where Bond was is a very huge chasm.
I mean, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
Well, Star Wars, if you go back and look at the original Star Wars, and then you look at The Rise of Skywalker, the Millennium Falcon's the same.
Mm-hmm.
and while you look at the Aston Martin DB5, yeah, we had it in Skyfall and it was introduced in Goldfinger, but in Skyfall you're like, wow, that's like a 50-year-old car he's driving. But you don't think that about the Millennium Falcon. You're like, that's just the Millennium Falcon. But because style changes, the Bond films, they're not timeless. They're of the time they're made in. So that dates them.
Right. And I know we got to start rounding out here. Adam Wolford sending $5, though. Your first time isn't always the best, but it gets better the more you get it. It's just like sex. The more of it you have, the better it gets. And I'm assuming so, that the films will get a little bit better. And again, I'm also prepared for some not so great moments as well. And again, I know some people are kind of upset that have been very critical of the film, but to be fair, Andre did try to kind of push me to be as critical as I could in many different ways, but also I also tried to look at it as, a classic film. I just don't see Dr. No personally being in that pantheon of my classic films that I, watch over the years continuously. It just, to me, I don't see myself going back to this one nearly as much as things like King Kong, obviously, and, It's a Wonderful Life, or anything else that's older that isn't more modern, I guess, is the only way I can put it. But again, I did enjoy it, and I do look forward to the next one. So yeah, hopefully it does get better.
Absolutely. Disaster area for
I like the don't panic icon there.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Says Dr. No isn't great. It has great moments. Not until Russia/Goldfinger did it become great. Like to know what Thomas thinks of Casino Royale. Yeah, well then you'll be waiting for quite a while longer.
A little bit. And maybe I'll watch the other Casino Royale too, along with that, perhaps.
Yeah, that's gonna be. I probably wouldn't recommend that.
I know what it is though. So I mean, I at least know of it and its existence. So
yeah, can maybe add in the unofficial movies into the chronology. But the real Casino Royale is badass. You'll be enjoying that one.
Well, maybe I will. And Mr. Tickle Trunk also sends in another one. Thank you so much. Circle jerks are boring. Be critical. Well, yeah, I tried to watch it with many different eyes. And like I said, next time I think that's why I'll watch it twice, just so I can kind of take it in a little bit more. So again, yeah, till next time, I appreciate everybody joining us. A lot more people showed up than I expected. And of course, I want to thank Robert for taking the time out of his schedule to do this as well. That's a very busy schedule, of course.
That's truly my pleasure.
Time. Yes, and look forward to next week, and we'll see who else may be joining us then. Until then, did you have anything to add, Robert?
No, this is just great. I want to thank you for allowing me to do this, and it was great that you suggested doing it, because how much fun are we having? A lot of fun.
Well, thank Voodoo, and that's a no plug on their part as far as they didn't pay us anything, but they just happened to have all the films on sale, so that's what was the catalyst for this whole thing.
And Stubble McShave sent us 20 Swedish Viking money, saying you won't have to endure more singing from Bond. So,
I didn't mind that so much. That was all right. And as Rob I think Rob pointed that out before, and some people pointed out in the chat, it's the first and last time Bond sings. So that means I don't have to at least worry about a Bond musical at some point coming into the fray.
Don't give them ideas.
My name is Bond, James Bond. I got a license to kill.
That would be something. And with that, I'd like to thank every single one in the chat for watching, and I'd like to thank Robert Meyer Burnett for joining us. It's always a pleasure when you're on. And for those wondering where to watch this now when the broadcast ends, it will be unlisted from Midnight's Edge, and then this is going to be re-uploaded to Midnight's Edge Live Archives, which is our brand new channel. So go check that out. We already have playlists of previous roundtables that you may have missed. That's on there. So that's where this is going to be. Also, check back tomorrow at 9 a.m. LA time. That's 6 p.m. Central European time and 5 p.m. UK time for our live show, Midnight's Edge in the morning. And then we have a very special guest joining us, someone that is quite familiar with the post-apocalyptic landscape that 2020s are looking to become. So join us for that. It's sure to be a treat.
All right. And anybody else? Rob, anything to add?
I'm good.
Yeah, and the final thing, of course, go and follow Robert Meyer Burnett over at
Absolutely.
the Burnett Network. That's one of the best channels on YouTube. So if you are not already subscribed and you do not already follow his daily content, then make it your business to do so. You will not regret it.
And
Well,
I'll be
thank you. I
sharing
appreciate
that link
that.
as well in the chat. And yeah, also I'm sure we'll be doing our Star Trek Discovery and Mandalorian reviews at some point over the next few days. Soon.
I think I'm going to scoop my eyeballs out with a teaspoon, and if I have to watch Discovery anymore, to be honest, and you'll know because I will be sitting in this chair, dead, the blood seeping out of the gaping holes in my face when I finally had enough.
You'll give them ideas for a scene, man.
Yeah, be careful with it. Well, let's just say that Robert Meyer Burnett did not much appreciate the most recent episode of Star Trek Discovery, like he did not appreciate any of the ones that came before it.
Well, maybe we'll be lucky enough to have him on board when we do dissect this next episode real soon. So until then, folks, take care of yourselves and